guys, Marco64 again today. Now today there's currently a winter snowstorm in my area right now, and it's snowing outside. So I figured I might as well wait out the storm by talking about the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. We're gonna see which one had a better design, mascot, controller, and commercials, and we're gonna see which one I think would be better. So let's just get started. Now let's start off with the design. The Sega Genesis is a 16-bit console that was released in 1988. Yeah, I did not know until early this year that this thing was actually released in the 80s. I thought it was released in 1990 or maybe 1991 and had Sonic 1 as its launch title, but no, it didn't. It actually had a previous pack-in title called, I think it's Golden Axe, is what it's called. Maybe it's a different game, but I'm pretty sure it's called Golden Axe. But either way, the design of the Sega Genesis is pretty cool. We have this big circle here where you insert the cartridge, a volume slider, an on and off switch, and a reset button. And then the two controller ports on the side, and a headphone jack. Who puts a headphone jack on a home console like this? And then you could see we have this thing right here, which if you were to take off this piece of red plastic, you could access the expansion port down here, which allowed for attachments like the Sega CD. And yeah. However, on the other end of it, we have the Super Nintendo, which, I can't lie, the SNES's American design is pretty cool, but I can't lie, I like the Japanese one a little bit better. However, though, it does have an eject button right here, which I just absolutely love pushing down when I'm bored. It's so much fun. We have the power button, the reset switches, and then we have this cartridge slot here. And on the bottom, of course, we have the expansion pack. We have the expansion area, kind of like the one that's on the left side of this, or kind of like the one on the right side of the Genesis. We have the controller ports here, a light so then you know when the power button's on, the Nintendo logo, a fan, and the ports here for the cords. And a thing where you can use to actually call Nintendo to help fix your Sega, or to help fix the system. So yeah, overall, I'm gonna have to give this one to the Genesis. Now, next up, we have the controllers. Now, the Sega Genesis controller is huge. Why is this thing so big? Now, I've obviously had a Super Nintendo for multiple months now. I got it in January of this year. And overall, and I've already seen and used a Super Nintendo controller before. And it's great. However, the Sega Genesis controller, I've only used the 6-buttoned one for a Raspberry Pi. I've never actually used or held or even seen a 3-button one in person. And I can't lie, this thing isn't bad. Well, yeah, this thing is absolutely huge. It has a decent D-pad and has A, B, and C buttons, as well as a start button, but no select buttons or shoulder buttons. And it has a fairly short cord as well. But yeah. However, I also have this random third-party Genesis controller. And while, yeah, it is also quite large like the first-party Genesis controller, it has completely different feeling A, B, and C buttons, which you can't even see these. I don't even think they actually had the little A, B, and C points on it. I think they only had them up here. And then the start button's a little bit smaller and moved up slightly. And there's this switch here. I don't know what this switch is for, but I presume it's probably for turbo, because this was the era when turbo was the craziest thing. Like, if you had a third-party controller that had turbo on it, oh my god, it's just like the arcades. And then there's also these little random bumps here on the bottom of on the sides of the controller. I have no clue what it's about because this thing must have been made for giants. Because, I mean, the Sega must have been thinking of giant hands when they thought of the controller because of how big it is. So now, next up, we have now for the Super Nintendo controller. Oh boy, this thing is a beauty. It is just the right size. Has multiple face buttons. Has 6 face buttons. X, Y, A, and B. Select and start. A D-pad and 2 new buttons. The L and R buttons, which are shoulder buttons. This thing also has a fairly glossy finish to it, honestly, which is interesting. But this thing feels so nice in the hands. It feels really good just being able to play some Super Mario World on this thing. It feels really nice just playing Super Mario World on here. Yeah, I'm definitely giving the controller one to the Super Nintendo. But this is coming from a guy who owns almost every single Nintendo console. So obviously I have more experience with Nintendo rather than Sega. So if I were to actually play the Sega Genesis and actually use the controller more, then I feel like if I were to just, like, for example, buy the Switch Online Sega Genesis controller, because that's the 3-button one, and we don't currently have an AC adapter for the Sega Genesis, so I can't use the Sega Genesis. Yeah. I can't lie. If I just took my time, played some game, like if I were to get like Sonic or something on the Sega Genesis, and spent my time with it, then I think I would actually really like the Sega Genesis controller. It feels good, but it's too big. The Super Nintendo controller not only has more buttons, but feels good and is a very nice size. So, yeah. Now, moving on to something I actually kind of forgot to talk about, or that I kind of forgot that I was going to do until just now, and that is cartridges. So, starting off with the Sega Genesis, when I found this at my grandparents' house, it only had 2 games with it: Street Fighter 2 Special Champion Edition and Krusty Super Fun House. Street Fighter 2 had nothing in it. Well, however, Krusty Super Fun House had a game cartridge inside of it. And yeah, these things are pretty small. I thought these things were a lot smaller than I expected. And then we also have a Sega 32X with it, which is bad. Yeah, my opinions on the 32X are interesting. But I can't lie, that's probably because I've never used it. We don't have any 32X games. However, though, it does simply just plug into the Genesis cartridge slot. Like that. And you can even attach the Sega CD. Now, the 32X is interesting, as it has a cord on the back that you use, and you can plug it into the Genesis. But it also has its own AC adapter that you have to plug into the wall. First off, this thing is heavy. It's like the Super Nintendo. It's like the GameCube's thing that's in the middle, and like the one on the Super Nintendo. It's really heavy. But what is even the point of this? Shouldn't it just be connected? Shouldn't it just be connected by inserting it into the cartridge slot of the Genesis and plugging this cord into it? I don't understand. So, yeah, it's interesting. We don't have any 32X games, though, but I do know you would insert this into a 32X and then insert the 32X into the Genesis, and then you can play 32X games. Yeah. Alright, now continuing the cartridges, we have the Super Nintendos. I only have one right here, which is for Super Mario World, but I can't lie, it isn't bad. These cartridges are a little bit larger than Genesis cartridges, and feel a little bit easier to insert into the console than the Sega Genesis, but than the Sega Genesis, but maybe that's just me being weak or something, I don't know. And it's obviously a lot easier to take them out now that we have an eject button here. So yeah, and they also have these things here that were on launch that made it so it's easier to just remove the cartridge off the system without, and even though people literally saw an eject button here, even though on the Super Nintendo Junior that released, I think in 1996, they didn't even include a eject button, but who would even buy that? It was 1996, the Nintendo 64 was coming out. But yeah. Now this one is another one I'm going to have to give to Nintendo, honestly. I like the cartridges more. They're a little bit larger, and they have a little bit of a more genius design for being able to easily take them out. Now we have the ads. Oh boy, the ads. Alright, here I am on YouTube. Let's take a look at the Sega Genesis. Genesis does what Nintendo don't add.
Genesis does
16-bit arcade graphics.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis does
16-bit sports action.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis does.
Get Joe Montana free, Pat Riley free, Buster Douglas free, Super Monaco GP free, or Collins free.
Genesis does.
What Nintendo don't. Buy a 16-bit Genesis system between now and October 31st and get an extra.
I hate Nintendo. Yeah, the Sega Genesis ads were extremely aggressive towards Nintendo and had basically completely screwed them over because this was in 1988 when Nintendo's most recent home console was the NES. Still the NES, which had only had 8-bit graphics. The Sega Genesis had 16-bit graphics. Alright, here I am back again on YouTube. Let's take a look at the Super Nintendo ad with Super Mario World for Super Nintendo.
Introducing the next generation from Nintendo, New Super Mario World, created especially for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. It's a bit more exciting, a bit more challenging, a bit more graphic, a bit more colorful, a bit more realistic, a bit more levels, a bit more secret, a bit more enemies, a bit more friends, a bit more sound, a bit hotter, a bit cooler, a bit weird, a bit more revolutionary, a bit more Mario, a bit more of what you want. It's 16-bit, and it's yours only if you get New Super Nintendo. Now you're playing with power, superpower.
Yeah, these Super Nintendo ads were not anywhere near as aggressive as Sega's ads, but they were still pretty cool. They had some charm to them. The now you're playing with power, superpower thing, and like the thing at the end that showed the Super Nintendo someone inserting a cartridge with all those other games is pretty iconic, I can't lie. So, yeah. Yeah, I think yet again, I'm going to have to go with Sega on this one. Now, now we have mascots. So for the first about 3 or so years of the Sega Genesis life, it wasn't doing too hot. It was barely even selling. And it seemed like Sega was going to end up flopping with this one, just like they did with the Sega Master System. However, though, Sega decided to create a mascot named Alex Kidd. Guess who that sounds like? That's right, me. However, that didn't really do anything. So Sega decided in 1991 to create a game called Sonic the Hedgehog, which absolutely exploded, boosting Sega all the way up to have about 55% of the market share, which means people liked Sonic. People bought the Genesis for Sonic. Sonic 1 was actually the pack-in title for a while there with the Sega Genesis. And then allowed Sonic to be Sega's mascot. And I can't lie. Yeah, Sonic is amazing. I absolutely love Sonic. I've played a lot of Sonic games. I've actually beaten Sonic 2 and Sonic CD. And even just like yesterday, and even on Thursday, I replayed all of Sonic 2, and I can't lie, that game was amazing. I really loved it. So yeah, I replayed it with Genesis Switch Online. So yeah, I really like Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, if you know me, I'm sure you know that I absolutely love Mario. I'm a Mario fanboy, okay? I'm wearing a Mario shirt. I have a ton of Mario games. I have about half of the Lego Mario sets, lots of Mario action figures. I just love Mario. It's Nintendo's mascot, obviously, and when they launched Super Mario Bros. In 1985 with the NES, it shot it up and saved the gaming industry. Thank you, Mario. You saved the gaming industry. Without you, I wouldn't be able to play Chibi Robo Ziplash. Yeah. Thanks to Mario, I get to play Chibi Robo Ziplash. Oh, I hate Chibi Robo Ziplash. Get out of my face, Mario. Well, So yeah, out of the two, which one do I think is better? Honestly, I think the Super Nintendo is just a bit better than the Sega Genesis. Now, well, yeah, the Sega Genesis does have extremely aggressive ads and a cooler design than the Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo has Mario, a better controller, a better mascot, and in my opinion, better game cartridges. Now, once I get more time to spend with the Sega Genesis, I might start liking it more though. But yeah, that's my opinions on Super Nintendo versus Sega Genesis. So if you guys really like this video, please like and subscribe. Bye!